Nigeria's journey to true political reforms currently hangs in the balance, with President Muhammadu Buhari's refusal to assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021. But Buhari's current refusal to assent to the amended bill, due to what he claims is the insertion of Section 87, which mandates political parties to use only the direct primaries mode for their internal elections, has upset the apple cart. While many Nigerians are accusing Buhari and the All Progressives Congress of foul play, others back his move to withdraw assent. In a power play that has upset the polity, the intrigues surrounding the last-minute addition of the direct primaries clause into the Electoral Act Amendment Bill in both chambers of the National Assembly has shown the underbelly of internal politics within the governing APC. Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, as a floor member in July, introduced the direct primaries clause in the House of Representatives during a clause-by-clause consideration of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, after a window created by public outrage and calls by Nigerians for the reversal of the Senate's earlier rejection of electronic transfer of election results. Gbajabiamila said he pushed for the direct primary clause in the Electoral Act Amendment Bill because the Not Too Young to Run Act is yet to address the exclusion of youths in politics.
I initiated that amendment, and I initiated it for good reason. It was simply for people to participate during elections. And these are the same people, and you see them all around me, that we call, every 4 years to come and campaign, come rain, come shine. They're out there singing, dancing, campaigning, knocking and pounding the pavement and knocking on doors for the party. So to me, it didn't make sense that these same people are not able to have a voice or a say in who represents them.
Gbajabiamila's introduction of the direct primaries clause sent jitters into many political camps across political parties. While state governors, especially in the governing APC, saw it as an attempt by lawmakers in the National Assembly to hit back at them after losing out in the APC local government and state congresses. Others aligned it with the Bola Tinubu political family and his 2023 presidential ambition. The loss of the congresses by many of Tinubu's loyalists in various states was linked to the direct primaries proposal and Gbajabiamila's introduction of the clause. In the Senate, 4 senators led the pack for the clause to be considered, including Senator Njomogoje, because they were also edged out by their home governors during the APC congresses. But what is direct primaries and why is it controversial now? Both chambers of the National Assembly had gone past the public hearing when the controversial direct primaries clause was introduced. At the public hearing stage, the major controversy was the issue of electronic voting and electronic transmission of election results.
The National Assembly Joint Committee on INEC, and that's Honorable.
But upon its introduction, the direct primaries clause caught fire among lawmakers, who speedily accepted it and saw an opportunity to convert their losses at the local government and state congresses into a gain. They capitalized on it, and both chambers hastily passed the bill. The APC governors, operating under the platform of the Progressive Governors Forum, at an emergency meeting, immediately rejected the National Assembly's passage of the bill. They agreed to meet with the leadership of both chambers to impress it on them to review the controversial Clause 87 on direct primaries and ensure that it is dropped during the Harmonization Committee before the draft bill is transmitted to President Buhari for assent.
The governors, based on all that, made an input that we think the party and the president might graciously consider.
But the efforts of the APC governors failed, and a conciliatory meeting was quickly summoned by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, as directed by President Buhari, to settle the uproar among lawmakers and governors, especially in the ruling party. A statement by the Office of the Vice President said, that just before Osinbajo could get back to the governors for a final resolution to be reached, the National Assembly played a fast one and passed the harmonized bill. Of the 21 clauses harmonized, 14 were adopted from the earlier ones passed by the Senate, and the remaining 7 clauses were adopted from the earlier ones passed by the House of Representatives. The controversial Clause 87, which deals with the mode of primary elections for political parties, reads as follows. The stage was now set for political fireworks as the battleground shifted from the National Assembly to the presidency. The governors worked round the clock to ensure that President Buhari rejected the Electoral Act Amendment Bill when transmitted to him. They insisted that the direct primaries clause must be discarded from the piece of legislation.
Whether it is direct or indirect or by consensus, I don't know any governor who is a governor elected in a particular state who would be afraid of the mode of primary.
Some of our members of the House of Rep and senators have performed tremendously well in their constituencies. They provided water, boreholes, schools. They touch the lives of the people in their constituency, and the people love them. So, but now if you don't have money to pay on the issue of the indirect primaries, which means paying delegate, it means you are out.
Most of the political parties also kicked against the introduction of direct primaries, arguing that it was very expensive. The parties, which include the governing APC itself, said they lacked the financial resources to conduct direct primaries, a development that led to suggestions that the government should form political parties.
It is more expensive in doing direct primaries, and it is even more undemocratic in doing direct primaries, because there the people you're sending out can decide to bring all sorts of figures, and at the end you create a lot of problems, litigation and all sorts of complaints that will be accompanying this and all that. But when you do indirect primaries, the people are still involved, because one, you deal with statutory people who were elected by the same people, and secondly, you work to elect 3 delegates per ward by the same party members.
Upon receipt of the transmitted bill on November 19, 2021, President Buhari began widespread consultations, including with the Independent National Electoral Commission and the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami. During this period, the governors and lawmakers engaged in massive propaganda, with groups loyal to the former stating that the direct primaries will cost INEC 500 billion naira to oversee party primaries, while groups loyal to the latter countered the allegations, describing them as baseless. In a leaked memo, Attorney General and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami also advised President Buhari to withdraw his assent, as making direct primaries mandatory for all political parties could cause confusion in the system, aside from the huge expenses that may come up. But unlike the previous letters he writes to the president, the AGF did not quote any section of the law which makes it illegal if the direct primaries method is upheld. At the expiration of the constitutional deadline of 30 days to either append his signature or not, President Buhari on December 20th wrote both chambers of the National Assembly that he had decided to withhold assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. He said it will upset the constitutions of political parties and be too expensive for the nation. Buhari advised the federal lawmakers to expunge the contentious Section 87 on direct primaries and get the bill back for assent. But Buhari's refusal to assent to the bill has led to public uproar, with many accusing him of being an anti-democrat, as he is yet to reform the electoral process more than 6 years of being in power.
Since the beginning of the amendment process, Nigerians have been very involved in the process and expressed expectations for an Electoral Act 2021. This will endure personal and partisan considerations and work for all Nigerians by creating an atmosphere for free, fair, and credible elections. We appeal and we urge the President to make this history happen.
It's clear that the governors are fundamentally opposed to direct primaries in the sense that that will affect the opportunity and capacity of them to impose candidate. So the President bowed to the pressure of the governors.
Several civil society organizations urged the National Assembly to override President Buhari's veto. After an initial attempt by some angry senators and representatives to collect signatures and override the president, the idea was later relaxed until they returned from their end-of-year holidays. But the president's action did not come as a surprise to many, including Governor Nyesom Wike of Rivers State of the opposition People's Democratic Party, who says the APC is afraid of allowing the electronic transmission of election results and that it only inserted the direct primaries as a means of distracting Nigerians because it has no intention of delivering a new electoral law in the first instance. The presidency has fired back at Governor Wike and the opposition PDP, saying that President Buhari stands by his decision. But those who support President Buhari says his decision to withhold assent is the best for the country. At the heart of their argument is the challenges of having a correct voters' register of members in political parties, the huge cost implication for Nigeria, and INEC's lack of manpower.
What we have is a piece of legislation that mandates only one method of getting candidates to emerge in the party. It is not a bad method. Okay, if you can have 4 conditions precedent in place, direct primaries is the best form of primaries. The 4 conditions are: 1, you must have a membership register that is open, that everyone agrees is the real membership register of the party. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, you need every member that is in that register to have a biometric card with barcode so that he can be easily identified before he can vote in the primaries. Okay? So we need to produce cards very similar to INEC voters card or the same quality. Thirdly, you must have a system or a mechanism for counting the votes in the direct primaries that everyone has confidence in. Okay? And fourthly, you need security to prevent non-members from coming into the venue to vote or thugs being imported to disrupt the voting. Okay? If you don't have these 4 conditions, direct primaries will be a disaster.
Even one of Buhari's fierce critics, Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, agrees with the president for refusing to assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. He says Buhari was right, as the issue of direct or indirect primaries should be left for political parties to decide. But the lawmakers insist that direct primaries remain the best for the country's polity and that the reforms will curb the incidence of money bags and godfathers hijacking political parties.
We want to have people who are really at the grassroots, those who really have the support of the common. And by so doing, it will reduce this issue of money politicking.
Now they are going to have register of member. All this one-man political party we respect will have to fizzle out.
As the nation awaits the next action by the federal lawmakers, there are already calls for them not to override President Buhari's veto, but simply recall the bill, expunge the controversial clause on direct primaries, and work on it, as there are already about 10 other identifiable drafting errors detected in the document.
If we're not careful, we are going to lose the opportunity, to test some of the innovations in the electoral bill. And we highlighted 3 in this statement. 1 is in the electoral bill, the state is required to provide and release funding for general elections 1 year before the elections. The reason why that was introduced in the law was to cure the mischief in 2018, where the budget for the 2019 election was only released to INEC 6 months to the elections, and about 35% of the outstanding funding was released in November. That's 2 months to the conduct of the 2019 elections.
But Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, says when the House reconvenes in January, the contentious direct primaries clause will be reviewed with appropriate decisions taken.
When we come back, like I said, to the House, we will determine if those amendments or if those reasons sit down well with the National Assembly, in which case we will, at that point, consider removing that clause and passing the bill so that we do not throw away the baby with the bathwater. But then it's not my decision to make. It's a decision of the whole National Assembly. If they determine that the reasons are not good enough, then there's a process, as prescribed by the Constitution as well.
Gbajabiamila says the electoral bill contains many innovative ideas and should not be totally jettisoned because of the controversial direct primaries clause alone. Nigeria's current electoral reform process is being undertaken in 2 phases by the National Assembly. The first phase is the Electoral Offences Commission Bill 2021, which was passed in mid-2021 with less controversies, while the second phase is the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021, which was finally passed in October 2021 but transmitted for assent on November 19, 2021. The Electoral Offences Commission Bill 2021 is aimed at regulating the conduct of elections in Nigeria. The following are its key provisions. The second leg of the electoral reforms is the controversial Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021, which is a repeal of the Electoral Act 2010. The Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021 attempts to address a plethora of issues peculiar to Nigeria's polity, such as the course of politics, internal democracy, the use of technological innovations, and fills gaps in extant provisions. It was passed with the following major provisions. The provision for the adoption of direct primaries, where parties run formal elections to declare their official candidates, has been the subject of heated debates among political actors, beginning with state governors of the governing All Progressives Congress, including other interest groups and individuals, who argue that Nigeria cannot afford having internal party elections using direct primaries, as the country is too poor. Questions are now being asked as to why President Buhari didn't assent to the bill and thereafter initiate a process for its further amendment, like he did with the Petroleum Industry Bill, which is now an act. Electoral experts say focusing on one item out of many and using same to undermine huge national expectations for electoral reforms is not a clever move by the Buhari administration.